Welcome, world. If you're new to this podcast, welcome to Future Readiness with Zar. If you're a regular listener, welcome back. Where have you been? I'm kidding, because you're going to probably ask us where we've been. So we've had a holiday, and this is our first recording of the year. So I'm hoping that it's finding you some way along the journey of meeting your obligations or whatever aspirations you've set for yourself this year. For those who are familiar with the podcast, as usual, we're always going to try and find smart, interesting, amazing, kind, magical people that I meet in my life. And when I find them, I latch onto them. So today I bring you yet another recent, find, amazing, smart, kind, super talented being. Her name is Glenda. She's going to introduce herself shortly, but I know that you will take away from this session, as you do from all other sessions, things you can apply in your personal life, in your professional life, and just magical things that you didn't even know about. So you are in for a great treat. So Glenda, welcome. How wonderful to have you. I'm sitting here chuckling like, yay, I have Glenda. So hello, Glenda. Welcome to Future Readiness.
Thank you, Zara, and thank you for inviting me. That's very gracious of you. That's a very good introduction. And I would hold the mirror back to you, because what an incredible forum and enthusiasm and energy you bring to all of us. So thank you.
You are so, and I know that because you don't have the benefit of visuals, you won't have the benefit of seeing Glenda's glorious smile. So just trust me that it's there. You'll hear it in her voice as we continue our dialogue. So, and I'm laughing because you're sounding so modest in the beginning. But I'm going to let you do if people were to say, who is Glenda, how would you introduce yourself?
I think I would take my core thing to say I'm a very curious person who loves ideas, loves creative people, and actually just love hearing about people and storytelling. I'm completely fascinated by the people around me, how we solve problems, how we face challenges, how we grow every day. And so I've just finished insights from my corporate annual review, which is always a bit daunting because people give you feedback and it's always in these grades and pay scales and things which I'm not that familiar with because I have an entrepreneurial background, just joined corporate. And I think the person in the UK, I could hear the smile in her voice because she said, the one thing everyone says about you is that you just keep trying to make things better. Which is such a lovely feedback.
But also, I think several things. So one is you've spoken about your love of ideas. So I want you to just take us back to that. When did you fall in love with ideas? I know in hip hop, they always ask, when did you fall in love with hip hop? So when did you fall in love with ideas? Because that's, I guess, the golden thread that gets us to a place where people are now saying this about you, that you're always trying to make things better. But when did you fall in love with ideas?
I think I got a graphic design diploma, and it was very technical in those days. Then I went to the UK and worked in advertising, and everyone said, one day I'll be creative. One day I'll paint. One day, when I get rid of all these damn clients, I'll be creative. And I kind of found that's a bit curious because clients pay our bills, but also why would you wait till you're 60 to really explore how creative you could be? I couldn't study in the UK because it was so expensive. You had to pay time and a half again to be an external student. So I came to UCT and I did a fine arts degree. And I think that was the first time that I really learned how powerful your authenticity and ideas and creativity are. And if you're given the space to express those, how wonderful your growth journey and everything in your life gets richer. And then I came back into advertising to pay for all my student loans. And I had the great privilege, I worked in a lot of design studios where we chased ideas, but they were never enriching or fulfilling. And I think one of the most fulfilling spaces I worked in was at Network with Mike Shillett and Keith Shipley, because it was a space that enabled ideas. And it built communities around ideas, and clients were part of the community for ideas. So we were all in it together. So I think it's a storytelling or a journey of this thing of exploring ideas and personal creativity. And I've then applied that in my own business. And, we did some great things. I was part of the team that launched Lucky Strike in South Africa. That was the power of an idea, and just to see how it could become viral and bigger and it could enrich so many people's lives, although it was smoking. So here's a self-disclaimer: bad product, great campaign.
Good idea.
These are ethical things that I will have to deal with at some stage in my life. And then I spent 17 years working with entrepreneurs and growing businesses through ideas, and finding another facet of how ideas really do enrich yourself and other people's lives, and they can be fun. Work doesn't have to be a grind all the time. And then I found myself really loving architecture and the architectural space, and I found, wow, those guys are resilient. When I speak to Bob van Bebber at Bogitman & Partners, we love Discovery Place. I love driving past it in Sandton. But he worked on that project for 13 years. And I kept asking him, how do you hang on to your idea? When you're dealing with technical engineering, these massive problems and projects, and it takes 5 months to fix this and 6 months to get approval on the facade. You and I come from an advertising background. One year in, we're done, baby. We're out. We've got the award. Boom. How do you keep the passion going for 13 years? And I mean, the outcome is phenomenal. That is a very beautiful building, and I drive past it with great glee. But I just realized these ideas, they need so many people, they need so many processes, but they are just the most delightful things because they can keep you going, they can keep you motivated, they can reach other people. It's an ongoing journey of discovery for me, Zah.
But I'm fascinated because I come from an environment where my gran was 103 when she died, and she didn't understand what advertising was. So she'd say to me, "What do you do?" I'm like, "I work in advertising." And then she'd say, "But I sit here all day watching TV and I see a lot of ads and you're not in any of them."
Didn't you make the casting cuts, so?
So clearly, you don't have a job because you think I was born yesterday. I don't see you in any of these. So I'm interested in whether you were raised in a home where there was an appreciation for ideas. Do you know what I mean? Because you have so many kids you meet who are in advertising and they go, "How do I get into advertising?" And I've often said to them, you have to be curious, because if you're not curious, you can't be inspired by what's around you. And if you're not inspired by what's around you, then it doesn't fuel your imagination. But where did that come from for you? Like, were you nurtured in an environment that was like that?
I think I was nurtured in an environment, and my parents are from the south of Johannesburg, so we didn't grow up with enormous wealth, but we grew up with enormous optimism and curiosity. So my dad would take me to the James Hall Transport Museum, to the Afrikaner Museum. So I'd be trailed around from those places, and it's a lasting love, actually. I still love a good museum. I can lose myself in an art exhibition. And my mum and dad, no matter what the circumstances or the challenges we were facing, always believed in the power of a better tomorrow. And I think that belief is a phenomenal thing to give anyone. And it fuels curiosity, because if you have hope, you can always find opportunity.
That's fantastic. I mean, I grew up in a home where my mother's a praying woman. So if I don't get to heaven, it's because I squandered some things. But she is in there. She'd be like in the front row. And part of what we were raised with, because we also didn't have material comfort, was a sense of charity, but also a sense of self-belief. Like, if you apply yourself in every way you go and with everything you have, and when you have more than you need to share, then the loss will come your way. So it's always beautiful to just reflect on, now that I guess we've had time and work to look at in our review mirror to just acknowledge the source, right? This is where the birth of who Glenda came from. So that's fascinating. You mentioned network. Hang on. Did our time overlap network or not? Because network was...
I think you left.
5. Yeah, it was 95 to 98.
I think I joined just after you, so I don't think were you there when they had set up Netwired as a through-the-line design studio.
No.
Because that was my baby, was that design into advertising space. So I'm not a pure advertising person, and my background is design primarily and branding.
Yes.
But I think increasingly, what I've realized, you were talking about charity and sort of having a give back. What I find really interesting now I'm a marketing person for a large real estate company and interior design company. What I'm really delighted by is how much I'm learning creativity sparks almost every part of a process and role. And there is a charity in that, because you learn that actually, at an agency, you have the creative divas. I think Keith Shipley used to call them the jet pilots, and then everyone else supports the jet pilots. What I'm really grateful about the leadership of the Tetris team that's taught me is just how much everyone has something to bring to the table around an idea. So you can start with an idea, but if you try and build that idea on your own, it's not possible. So your gran is going, where's Zara? Why isn't she in this? Why isn't she sipping Joko tea in the Joko? But what I really learned, and I didn't appreciate it when I was in advertising, was just how important the client service director was in helping you sell an idea, and how important the production person was in terms of costing that idea. And so it's only now later in the process of growing up in the business that I realize how valuable everyone is around making an idea work. And I'm going to come back to charity because there's a bounty in belief. So I'll never forget Lucky Strike. So here we are, Bates, we're not the most creative agency at that stage. We're struggling. We've got some great clients, and we get the opportunity of a lifetime working with Philip Morris. But now we go into paralysis because, oh my goodness, we need a big idea. We have meetings, we have brainstorms. We have to crack this idea. We have to crack this, guys. This is it. This is the big opportunity. And oh my goodness, the late nights, the stresses, the struggles. And there was a guy, a musician called Colin, who was a writer. I can't remember his surname, but I always remember the moment really, really well. Brent Cookert, who was the creative director, was in his office holding another review. I was the design director. Oh, yeah, just endless late nights. And I literally walked in, and Colin was reading a music magazine, and he said to me, Oasis are playing these blind concerts, these kind of underground concerts in London, where they use a different name, and you've got to be in the know to know who's coming. Like you really have to be at the edge of cool to know where they're going to play. And I don't have good ideas. I recognize them. And in that moment, I said to him, that's it. You've cracked it. Yeah. But then the journey to go to Bryn's office and go, what do you think about this? But then to go to the account manager at the time, Kevin, and go, do you think we could sell this? And to go to Louise Boxall Davies, who was the strategist at the time, and go, can you build a strategy around this? And then to go to Philip Morris and go, could you believe in this? Could you give us the charity of belief? It's a wild idea. Yeah. Could you give us the charity of belief that we could produce this? And so a great viral campaign was born. But actually, no one really had the idea. One person had a little what if, and then it took all these other people to go, I can see your what if. That's amazing.
But also what's beautiful, though, is that when you have a client, as to use your phrase, I love that, charity of belief. When you have a client who extends to you that charity of belief, who says, I don't know, but I trust you, and let's go, right? Because part of what can be dispiriting for a creative person is working with safe clients. So somebody who says, who else has done this? Because if nobody else has done it, then it means...
Can we research it?
You know what I mean? And you and I are sitting here and we're going, but that's exactly why you should be doing it, because that's what pioneering is. That's what being competitive is. That's what being differentiated is. I mean, Andy Russ, rest his soul, would tell you that the power of an idea is its originality. Because if a Nike ad reminds me of Puma, then you've done a bad job. But so I guess the question I'm asking you is, how do you deal in those instances where clients in your past lives haven't extended to you the charity of belief? Or is it even something you're experiencing in your entrepreneurial journey? Like, how have you dealt with that? The absence of charity of belief.
I think what happens is you exit those clients, because what generally happens, and I think I learned that in 17 years of running my small design studio called Sizakele. There would be a great person, a visionary, who would come in, and I would have cut out a cardboard model and done a drawing and said, this is it. And they would look at me and go, I have no idea what you're talking about, but it looks great. Will it make us stand out? Yes, it will. Yeah. Will you be able to do it? Yes, I will. Okay, let's do it. Yeah. So those people fuel your own enthusiasm and make you go further on a project, right? So, and every project, Zara, you would have experienced this. No matter what you do, everything you do in life at the 85% mark goes through the ugly bit, where you've put in all the sweat equity, you've had all the conversations, you've sent the emails, and it's still not just there, and you're exhausted. And the thing that gives you resilience in that moment is if you have a like-minded team and client alongside you to go, we can do this together. Because if you don't have that, and you would have seen it, how many campaigns have we worked on that are cool, and then at the last minute they just dip.
Yes.
And actually that's the moment of bounty, because that's when you actually all have to work together to go, we can do this.
Awesome.
And I think it gives you the ability to overcome challenges and obstacles. And now even my corporate... Yeah, sorry, Zara, I interrupted you.
No, so I was chuckling when you were saying when you don't have a client who extends that charity of belief, you exit them. I'm like, you've got bills to pay, So you remember how you've got like clients for dough and clients for show. So the balance is just how much dough do you just keep to keep your lights on, and then where do you look for the clients who are for show, right?
That's a good thing. So I think everything in life is about energy. I think money is one thing, but I think energy is everything. So what we used to do at Sizakele, and it's funny because now in my role at Tetris, we just had a talk about this, is you have to quantify where you're going to put your energy. So be thoughtful and mindful, like you would in your personal life with your relationships, of which ones are going to bring you energy back. Some of those may not make a lot of money, but they are going to bring you energy. So a cool little idea that's just going to keep your heart aglow and keep you going through some of the tougher moments, that's your energy nugget. Then you have the middle ground ones where not everything's going to bring you that energy. But I think, Zara, when I met you, one of the people in the forum we were in together said to me, well, how do you bring that creative energy into everything? And I go, well, if you remember that everything you do enriches someone somewhere. Gosh, I remember even when I was doing the promo copy for Willard's crisp packets in London, actually the care you took with that was going to excite some 5-year-old that they could win a skateboard. So somewhere, someone you'd never met, it's a horrible creative job, spending endless hours going, win. How big can I make it? How small can I make it? Which color should it be? Should it have a drop shadow? And these things that keep you up at night. And it goes to research and they say it's definitely a green drop shadow. So actually, it can be quite a soulless thing. But if you can just keep in mind that there's a 5-year-old whose eyes are going to sparkle when they reach for that crisp packet. It's about creating energy. And And so I hear you on the show and the dough, but you always have to be mindful. If it's all just the dough, it's not sustainable. You won't get up in the morning, you'll lose your spark. So you have to balance the two. And Zara, the one nice thing about running an independent agency is when I felt people were abusive or were not going to honor any of those things, I did have the opportunity to exit them. Awesome. And every time I exited one of them, it's always that old adage, when you shut doors, new things open. And I don't think it's about, well, let's hope someone comes because we've got to pay the rent at the end of the month. I think you then take into your next client interaction a positivity and an enthusiasm that they can feel. Because if you drag yourself into that room feeling like, well, I better sell this thing because we've got to pay salaries at the end of the month, which is hard. But if you go in going, I think this idea is going to change the world, it's going to make your life better, I'm excited about it, you can already feel in my voice, someone's going to go, oh, I want to be part of that. That's fun. Let's do it. So
energy is contagious, right? And what's wonderful is if you enter a room where people are receptive and they reciprocate, then you just literally are just building these buckets and buckets of energy. Because it is true, it's not time management, is energy management. In fact, I was saying to someone the other day that we don't waste time, we waste life. So if you think about it that way, it adds an even deeper layer of intentionality in just how you spend your moments between sunrise and sunset. So do you turn towards the things that spark joy? Do you turn towards the things that elevate you and elevate others? Or do you just look at the setting sun, right, or the back of the moon and bemoan everything that's not going right? Because you have the choice, you have the choice. You really do have the choice. So I'm fascinated by just how much you are investing in the energy as currency, energy as a building block for joy, for creativity, for stuff like that. Here's a trick question for you. How do you define creativity? Because I've had a million healthy and unhealthy, loud and soft conversations with people who still feel that creativity is confined to artistic ability. And my definition is creativity is problem solving. It is your unique way of connecting dots. And I'm grateful that at last, the World Economic Forum is finally listing creativity as the top 10 skills that are needed for the world of future, for the needed for future success. Can I wake up, please? Is that okay? Like, I'll wake up eventually. So I'm fascinated that creativity has found its way to that top 10 list. But I'm interested in your definition of how would you define creativity?
Mine's closer to your view. It's about problem solving. But I think, I'll tell you a story. It's the best way I can answer it in terms of even stretching my imagination of creativity. Is when I was at Bookman and Partners, just taking on the marketing role, they'd invested in a woman called Professor Leslie Loco, who was running the Graduate School of Architecture at the University of Johannesburg. She had just set it up, and it was a master's program in architecture. And I remember going to the final year student exhibition and seeing the most beautiful visuals that were way beyond some stuff I was seeing in design studios. Extraordinary stuff. And over time, I learned Leslie's premise, and then she's gone on now. This year, she wins the Reba Gold Medal for architecture. She was the director, the first African woman to be the director of the Venice Architecture Biennale. Yep. Wow. But her premise in building confidence in students and perhaps reshaping our vision of Africa was that if you can't imagine the future, you can't build it. So it extended my idea of problem solving, Zara, because yes, often in commercial advertising, a client has a problem, we apply our creativity, we solve it. But Leslie's vision was so much bigger because she said we have to imagine the next future perspective of problems, and we have to do it with pure creativity, because if we can visualize and imagine that, we can create different futures. So there was a massive upskilling of my own scale of what is creativity. And that's an incredibly powerful thing. So if you can imagine a future and you can do it in a very creative way, you can create the most extraordinary futures. That isn't just about solving problems, because problems are what you have in front of you now, in your current plateau and landscape. But what happens if you imagine a new landscape?
Yes.
I mean, it's incredible what you could do there.
I like that. I like that idea of solving for the present and imagining for the future. I love that. I love that idea, because here's what I'm finding. I'm thinking that the old school sort of client is a client who still says, what's happening commercially, can you solve it creatively in ways that may or may not benefit society, right? And the sort of work that we like to do in our practice is we look for the client who says, what's going on in culture? How might you extract from that creatively in ways that uplift us commercially? So the commercial component becomes the end of your process, not the beginning of your process. Because if you start with the commercial component, then all you're doing is profiteering, right? If you start with the culture or the social component, then what you're doing is exactly what you've just discussed, which is designing with the human in mind and being deliberate about leaving a long tail of positive outcomes that are just bountiful and rich and additive to the human family.
Sure.
What do you think of that?
What you've just described is so interesting, Zara. So I have a friend who's an economist, Syed Kinney, and he keeps telling me, Glenda, you have to realize that bus we built with the Industrial Revolution is going off the cliff quite soon. And I think what he's talking about is short-term profitism, if I could call it that. I don't even think that's a word, which we still see a lot of in the world. Yeah, we still see a lot of that in the world. But I think with things like climate change, we talk about the change in our culture from COVID, but I think there are bigger issues in culture where we know that at the forefront, the visionaries are those creative people who are going to help us see new things. And if you can focus on those things, and I do think if everyone benefits in a process, it's a richer project in 110 ways. And there are very many ways to benefit. One extracts profit. Obviously, if you're in business, that's the core driver. But we know now if you don't have happy people in a business or happy consumers who believe in what you're doing, you might make profit this year. You might have a good shareholding by having a reductive mindset and cutting jobs and making people miserable, but your long-term sustainability is not going to be there. And I think more and more people are onboarding that. So, and I think here's a great moment for creative people because someone needs to connect that culture or zeitgeist, if I could call it, to projects. And it will involve some difficult conversations. It's not going to be, everyone holds hands and skips into the rosy future. There's some tough conversations to be had in that, but they're valuable ones. And the process won't be easy.
I'm so desperate to get to see like a wave that turns in this direction that you and I are speaking about. Because if you remember, like 15 years ago, even this idea of shared value, right? Like CEOs were not listening to this. Like, what do you mean shared value? We're in business for profit. So don't come and tell us there's a concept called shared value. 15 years later, everyone is now talking about shared value. So I'm impatient with how slow great transformative ideas take, like how slow they can embed in a corporate environment where people are raised in a different universe that just says, if you're not making profit, it's not important. Because you've got that one piece, you've got that marketer who wants to do what you and I are talking about, right? But that's not what she's evaluated on at the quarterly review. She's evaluated on how many units did we shift of this shampoo or of this beer? So when you and I are saying there is a different role for your financial services brand, for example, to do amazing stuff beyond just trying to tell me that you'll give me more interest or I'll get a private banker 24/7, right? Like think about banks that were shutting down branches over the last 3 years. Some of those branches are still standing empty. And I'm frustrated because I think you can turn those branches into Sunday school and use them to drive financial inclusion. So open the bloody branch, have people, have your seniors in your bank come and teach young kids how to manage finance. Call that Sunday school, have people have a greater appreciation of what money means. And because you're not selling them anything, you are helping them grow. When they have the means, they'll choose you. But the marketing manager is not going to be rewarded for that. So she's not going to do that now. She says, great idea, but no, that's not what I get rewarded for. So I'm sharing with you.
I hear your frustration, but I think it's about learning many languages and creating many smaller successes. So the two things strike me while you're talking. The one is there's a smile in my mind. I remember going to a strategy course at Gibbs with Nick Benadell.
Yeah.
And it was at a particular time in the market when everyone was talking about the rise of China, the economic power of China. And I remember him saying, no. China's been an economic power for 6,000 years. They had a glitch for 100 years. So I think, and I remember being in Addis Ababa, working on the Africa Architecture Awards and being struck by a young architect drove me out on the outskirts of Addis Ababa because there's a massive Chinese influx of development money, building money, architectural money, construction. I drove past, must have been 5 or 10 minutes of 17 to 20 floor buildings that were empty, absolutely empty, built by Chinese money. And I could not believe I was seeing. I thought I was looking at a science fiction film. And he said, no, the point really being is that the Chinese view of change is long, far more patient than we are, because they know that we're going to have this rise of populations for urban cities. We know that we're going to have people moving off agricultural space and the farmlands into the cities. And ultimately, they're going to move into these buildings. And while they had cash and resource, they've built the spaces where those people are going to move into. So I think there's an understanding in my mindset then of how long does change take and how do you invest in change? And I remember I met a great farmer once called Paul Sefton when he was a much older man, and I loved walking on his farm. But when he was a young guy, in his 20s, he'd planted trees with the idea that his grandchildren would picnic underneath them.
Yeah.
So I think often in this race for annual rewards, 3-year strategies, quarterly reviews, the value you're looking for, Zara, is not something that can be delivered in a quarter or 3 quarters.
Exactly.
So what we're looking for is long-term vision and tenures and KPIs that encourage and reward long-term vision, because we made a profit this month, we didn't. We sold so many units this quarter, we didn't. You do not want to be the marketer at the year-end review and your little bar graph is planing on a happy little level, because this is not good news. And I think there's no
performance here.
But there's no way to put on that bar graph that if you guys can stick with this plan in 5 years' time, we're going to have X, Y, Z, right?
Yeah.
Because the structure that we're working in is just not built that way. So maybe I like your thought. Maybe you have to rethink the structures and the vision. And I think that's why entrepreneurs change the world more, because they can form those long-term visions. So whether you agree with Elon Musk's theories of repopulating Mars or putting plants into humans' brains, He's not answering to a board going, how much money on R&D? And where are the chips? And how smart are those people yet? And what do you mean you've blown up more rockets? So what do you mean it blew up again when it landed, really? So I think it is about some structures enable that and some don't. But I hear your frustration because it's hard when you're in the short-term cycle to find the people who have the long-term vision.
And that I guess is my next question, right? Which is, how then do we continue to use creativity as a force for good, right? How do you, because I like what you're saying earlier about learning many languages. Why does the language, or what's the new vocabulary that creativity must present or can present to encourage people to have this longer term view, but also to just be brave, just be brave?
I think I'll use charity again, curiosity and kindness, because I think Sir John Hegarty's running quite an interesting creativity course, an online thing. After COVID, he felt the need to share his strategies on creativity. And I think I like what he says about always putting yourself in the other person's shoes, problem solving, understanding the challenge. So I'll talk to a challenge we have now at Tetris Design and Build.
Yes.
Which is, with the change of offices, whether you scale up or scale down, you're going to have excess furniture. And your bank's example made me think of this, Sarah.
Yes.
However, in South Africa, there's no market for second-hand furniture because it's easier and cheaper to buy it. So even Pick and Pay is now doing flat pack furniture. So I'm setting up an office. I'm going to go and get a Pick and Pay flat pack furniture. I'm not going to pay you whatever for your second-hand. So we faced with this challenge. So again, with curiosity, I had this, well, what if we reached out to culture, to the visionaries, and I borrowed from Leslie Loco and said, dear design visionaries, take some of this old furniture and reimagine it for us in a new landscape. Show us what a future of work could look like.
Yeah.
We're now in the throes of trying to unpack that project, Zara, and it's challenging because you have to deal with procurement people who are going, but that furniture is valuable. It's mine. It costs money. We need to repurpose it. It's no use me going to that person and going, but look at my new landscape. Look what I could do. Look at the media attention I could get. I'm going to bring you 6 million rand back in exposure. It's awesome. The marketing people understand that. But you have to slow down and go, but for the facilities guys, what are the challenges I'm bringing to them? I'm going, unpack your storerooms. Who's going to transport that furniture? And actually, I'll come back to your thing. I'm so busy. I'm already working a 13-hour day. And now you're coming, well, this big idea is amazing. I'm going to add another 3 hours to your day. And they're going, no, go away. So that's what I'm saying about learning different languages and trying to create downhills so that people, water runs downhill. So instead of saying, this is a big idea, it's trying to say, well, how will this idea work with you? And can we tap into a collective benefit? Guys, we can't talk about sustainable office fit-outs and furniture if we're not resolving this challenge for our clients, because they're going to be paying storage on it. So then we come back to that magic tool called the spreadsheets because it's a different language. So, okay, let's quantify how much money are you paying on storage?
Yes.
And can this idea change that? So it's sort of trying to understand. I think it's that Edward de Bono, everyone wears a different hat, right? Yeah. So some people are going to be the black hats going, that's a risky idea. It's crazy. You're going to end up with 10 horrible exhibits and you're not going to get media. No one's going to be interested. And then you'll get the blue sky hat going, that's amazing. What a great conversation we're going to start. And then the analyst's going to go, but you haven't solved the problem. Right. And the optimist will be going, but I can start the dialogue on how to solve the problem.
Yes.
I think that's the creative's role, is to go, I don't know how much effort or energy it's going to take to solve this thing, but I have the hope and the belief that by starting the conversation, we can start the step in the right direction. And I think that's very powerful.
And that's incredible. That's such a huge thing. I remember when I was being interviewed at this financial services brand that will remain nameless, I asked the leader who was interviewing me, I said, how many other crazies are in the zoo, right? Because I am crazy. And my magic is in this craziness. So how many other crazies are here? And they were honest. They said, you would be the only one. In my mind, I thought, great opportunity, right? Because it means I can introduce things, make things, But the reality is, when you're the only crazy in the zoo, then in the beginning, you're a source of fascination, and in the end, you become othered. It's like, oh, give it to the crazy one. Yes.
And
so it
and
can
also,
feel lonely.
you're not given stature. It can actually, first of all, I think creativity needs collectivity.
Yes.
There are some creatives who can lock themselves in a room. So Jonathan Fraser, the writer, who took all distractions off his laptop, locked himself in an island somewhere with no artwork on the walls, and then wrote his great novel. That's fantastic, but I'm not one of those people, because I feed off other people. And in a corporate, I think people do that with creatives as well. I think it's, I think where we could talk about that, Zara, is we did see over the last 10 years this rationalization of bringing creative in-house, internal design departments, internal DTP departments. We see it now, I think. Didn't I meet at that Gibbs Forum? The new insurance companies are hiring creatives and bringing them into their corporate space to be their internal. The challenges
like
I had
with
that
agency.
I beg for contrary point of views and things, but the problem with that is that you don't actually refresh your own stream or challenge your own narrative. And in fact, if you're the lone crazy, where does your narrative go? How's your narrative grown? How's it improved? All you are is going to be the other person who brings color, and I mean crazy color, into the room and enthusiasm, and then we'll get on with business. So I think that is a very tough position. And I think it's hard to be an in-house creative all the time, because you need someone to see it from such a different point of view and challenge you.
Yes.
And that's really hard if you part of the daily grind, right? How many units did we sell today? How many units did we sell today? Great creative. How many units did we sell today?
Yes.
That's quite demotivating eventually.
Nice idea. What did you sell? You go, oh, okay, all right. Well, this is going to change the world. Like, I won't be around when the world changes, so I'm not interested. So give me my results today, right? So that's it. But part of what I like as well, Glenda, that you're mentioning is, I have said the following, and I want to sense check it with you. I'm fascinated by businesses I hear over and over again talking about customer centricity, right? So we're a customer-centric business or a customer-centric business, and my pushback is we are customers some of the time, and we are human all of the time. So what if you were just human-centric as opposed to customer-centric? Because for me, customer centricity still speaks about the transactional nature of that relationship, whereas human centricity speaks to that benevolence you were speaking about, speaks to what is this thing that is affecting your ability to enjoy this human experience, and how might I use my creativity to solve for that? What's your view?
I think that's such a nice insight. And I think there's enough pushback at the moment. People, when you start small businesses, people go and get that 16th century art of war book, and we have targets and we have tactics, and it's quite aggressive language, actually. Yes. So I think what's interesting and what you made me reflect on is when I call someone customer-centric, it means I'm not seeing them in their entirety.
Yes.
So if I don't see them in the entirety, I just see them as a sale. I don't see them as a long-term partner. And brand loyalty is about long-term partnership, right? Because you're both committed. You're both enjoying something out of the transaction. So I hear you. I think what you'd have to do is, it's tricky, Zara, because if you just change the languaging and you don't change the mindset, you haven't solved the problem. So if you say to people, please stop talking about targeting, because actually there might be better language like buy-in or, I don't know, think about it. But I hear you. I think that's a wonderful insight, because if it's your, and I do say this with my 9-year-old son a lot at the moment, have to think about the power of words because they carry energy. So if you keep saying we're customer-centric, but we really care about you, at a fundamental level, there's a tension between those two statements, isn't there? So that's a lovely insight. So I'll have to think about that, but I really think it's a very good insight.
And for me, it feels like that is just how you create. You may not have called it this, but that is how you create. This idea of planting trees because somebody thinks their grandkids can picnic under them. That's about speaking to the human, right? Somebody else may say, well, I'm going to put aside money so that my children have a lot of money when they grow up. He's not thinking, here is money I'm going to give you. He's thinking, here is an experience. I'm bequeathing the earth to you because I'm a steward of what these things don't belong to me. I'm just going to leave them with you and for you, but I'll take care of them whilst I have them in my hands. So I'm motivated by leaders and practitioners and creators and makers who are starting to challenge themselves and place the human at the center of it all. So what will this do to advance the human family is a very powerful question for me. And I'm excited about the possibilities of all the crazies in the zoo attending to that question from the multiple avenues of life and perspective that we have. Like, I feel like there should be like a forum for the crazies, and we're all governed by this one question that just says, how might we use our unique skills to advance the human family?
Well, I think we, depending on where you stand, I think we're also the crisis in the human family with the planet and climate change. I know you have a house in Pringle Bay that's just come under threat from excessive fires. So perhaps my utopian self goes, well, if there was a moment for the crazies, it's probably now. We'll go back to the famous Apple ad, the 80s one, the 90s one.
Those who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
The ones who do. But I think also an interesting thing comes to me when you say steward, and I think legacy. I think of some great brand leaders in perhaps some of the main FMCG brands. Must also be quite daunting if you think of it, to take over, let's say, chief marketing officer of an epic brand. It's, a famous beer. Into my heart, I want that person to be brave and courageous and to put their foot down. But I wonder how creative we can be in executive development, support, leadership dialogues to support those people, because we can't create a binary of it's them versus us. Because actually, what a scary place to be. So, I'm thinking of someone I worked with who's taken over an MD role of a leading carpet manufacturer here in South Africa with European ties. And there's part of me that goes, what a daunting task. You have to be filled with bounty, hope, and charity. You have to be surrounded by crazies, because the scale of the responsibility of what you're doing in terms of livelihoods, looking after an epic brand, ensuring continuity. So I think there are different ways of challenging and enabling. And I think creativity has to enable as well. It can't just rail against the status quo. Because Marcel Vanders, the interior designer, once a design in Darby said, "No one wants to make an ugly thing." And I'm quite
Nobody
sure.
wants to. I missed that. Say that again, Brenda. I missed that.
Nobody wants to make something ugly. It's even if it's dough, in your heart of hearts, and this is the optimist in me, you don't want to make something ugly or useless. I really optimistically believe in people's hope inside themselves. If I took over as a great brand and I had this commercial responsibility to sell units, I would want to surround myself with people who understood my world, my language of this is hard, but they enabled me to have braver conversations to start changing things. And I think that's also a kind of creativity. Because if I come to you with a challenge idea and we all got stuck with disruption can be flipping scary, Zara. I've got so much to manage, and now these guys want me to change our production cycle, change our sales cycle, change people, change the market. That can be quite hard. So perhaps the bottom line is there's a kindness, and with kindness we can change things and be creative. So I love your thing about I will think about it.
I've got hope. Like if we're blessed to have crazies in the world like you, and we'll continue to find each other so that we light these fires, right? My mother was always clear about how one candle, even when it shares its light with another, doesn't necessarily dim its own light. So this idea that just because you're sharing doesn't mean that you become less. In fact, it is in the sharing that you become larger. So I am filled with optimism about our ability as a caring, creative community, that we will use these skills with great responsibility. Yeah, of course, when you're younger, your ego wants the award, so you're not really interested in how many old ladies you drive over in your Ferrari from your bonus. In fact, you're yelling at them because they're crossing too slowly. And then much later you think, how might we redesign the walkway so that an elderly person can cross safely and the Ferrari person can also have something to do instead of just raging at the older person. So I'm excited about how we can use it to solve stuff.
One thing, we were speaking about ideas earlier on, and how did I discover the power of ideas? And there's one reflection I have, and I was just thinking it about now when you were talking about building bridges.
Yeah.
The one thing that always struck me, so Network did an incredible Hollard ad with a frog who sits and you look at him for a long time and eventually croaks, and a lion comes up and goes, everyone croaks, and Hollard laughs. Yeah. So I remember there was a very difficult ad for Network to sell into Hollard, and then it became a very famous ad. But the thing that I really, really loved, because I wasn't at Network when they made that ad, but I was part of the team now who was going to migrate to the next campaign. And what I loved about walking through Hollard was the people in the call center had their own little frogs, sculptures, statues, stickers on the desks. They really believed in that idea. It had completely been taken on board and owned by everyone in the organization. And I don't diminish the role of internal branding to do that, but I love the fact that one lady I spoke to in the call center had every year bought a little sculpture of a frog because she really bought into that ethos. Trying to get rid of the frog was really hard because everyone owned the frog. So that is the power of an idea and enabling people, because you could go, well, it was a cool TV ad and it won awards and whatever. But someone sitting in the call center looked at their frogs and really believed in what they were doing at that moment in that day. And I think that's incredibly powerful. That's the power of a great idea.
That's such an incredible thing. In fact, I'd forgotten that ad. I just remembered it now when you were just sharing it. I'm like, I miss great, big campaigns. Like I miss seeing something that moves. I don't watch a lot of television, so I don't know what's available or what's on screens now. But you will not believe this because literally you and I have been speaking for almost an hour. I told you that time flies.
Goes quickly.
That's what happened.
Goes very quickly.
I know. And before I let you go, I always ask our guests at the end of the show to just reflect on what does future readiness mean for you? We've spoken a lot about the present, the past, and the next. But if you were to just distill it in a phrase that is honest and true to you, what does future readiness mean for you? Because the reason we named this podcast Future Readiness is because in our own little way, we're trying to expand people's understanding that first, the future is not 10,000 years away. It's the minute that follows this moment. And secondly, that readiness for that future is not just tech. Because a lot of times when people speak about future readiness, they're actually speaking about the technology. And for me, I really believe that the future is that place where everything starts with a human in mind. So I'm interested in how you would reflect on what does future readiness mean.
I think future readiness would be irrespective of where you sit in life or what age you are, or how much money you are, because there are so many unknown things and new things. And it's no different from if I was a cottage crafter engaging with the industrial age. It must have been terrifying. Everything about your world was changing. So it's not new. I think to be future ready, you have to walk towards the thing that scares you with the generosity of kindness and curiosity to find out more about it and yourself.
Oh, I'm going to put that on a T-shirt. Glenda, I love that. I love that a lot. I love this idea of walk towards what's scary with curiosity and kindness, you said, right? Or generosity and kindness.
It's curiosity and kindness, because 9 times out of 10, the thing that scares you, if you start to understand it, can often excite you.
I love that. Oh man, this is a banger. I love that. So you see, we're going to have another conversation because maybe what we actually do is start to have a real talk. Imagine if in an interview somebody said what scares you, as opposed to what do you hope to contribute to this role? Tell me about all your successes. But like, just because this is such a big opener, right? It is when I answer the question, what scares me, I'm going to speak to you from my heart, not from my head. And it would be just such a beautiful opener.
I think it also encourages, and it's something I'm wrestling with in my own management style at the moment. It's how do we license people to make mistakes and to be vulnerable and to be scared? Because it's one thing to be crazy and to tackle all these things, but no one's infallible, right? So in the middle of my furniture project the other day at 6 o'clock in the morning, I thought, I'm crazy. I'm giving up this idea. It's not in any of my KPIs. I'm pushing this boulder up the hill. It's hard. So I think if we could start those conversations to say to people, well, I think Amy Edmondson calls it in her book, fail for the right reasons. Not the hardcore, aggressive 90s fail fast, fail furious hackathon kind of thing. I'm much more mindful of, let's try, let's know it may not work, but let's be kind to each other if it doesn't. And let's learn.
Yes.
Yeah. And it sounds so easy to say, Zara, but my goodness, it's hard to put in practice because we've all had those days. It's 4 o'clock, the thing hasn't happened, it hasn't gone right. Not really your best self at that moment. It's trying to how do I think back? How do I remember the big idea? And those are difficult management skills, I think.
No, that it's hard. It's hard, and you're correct. Like, I know for me that if you've literally spent 90% of your time pitching on ideas and all of them come back to zero. But by the time you're going to try for that last 10%, you're no longer experimenting. You've now become so safe because you think, I've tried the mad bit, it didn't work, so now let's go back inside the box. And living inside the box is a horrible place for a creative, because it's just not a place. It's just not a place where I find I can thrive, unless the box has holes. So you put me in it, I'm going to dig a hole in the corner just to allow air to come in and ideas to escape. But this has been splendid, Glenda. What a joy.
Thank you. What a great conversation. Yeah, it was really interesting.
So next time we're going to do it in person. Across your offices, so you don't have to see me waiting.
Would you please shoot a flare out when you're there, so that I get out of my narrow little, what is Jill call it, my fur-lined rat of running backwards and forwards between offices and actually look up at the horizon.
I'm going to wear a balloon so you can see me. Literally, I'm just going to...
Or just pop a champagne cork. That generally attracts my attention quite quickly.
That's exactly what I'm going to do. But how joyful, how joyful. Thank you so much for sharing from your heart. It's a very rich thing.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for your, I would call it bounty, because it's very seldom that you get to have expansive conversations. And so when you find someone you can have expansive conversations with, it's so valuable. So thank you.
Yes. And I thank you too. So this is our sign off. So that's Glenda. Her bio will be in the link below, and all her other magical bits, including some of the books that she referenced, so that you can go find them and widen and grow your own world. So until next time, this is Zah. As always, we wish you clarity and courage. From now on, Full Circle will be called Future Readiness with Zah. And we'll still have those thought-expanding conversations and the streams of encouragement that you enjoy. If you're already subscribed to Full Circle with Zah, you are automatically subscribed to Future Readiness with Zah. And you can continue to listen to all the conversations on the podcast platform of your choice. But also let me know if there are any specific topics or guests you would like us to host. Enjoy, like, and share. And until the very next time, I wish you clarity and courage.